Tuesday, July 6. This is the news on PBCJ. I'm Simone Absalom Gale. The Ministry of Health and Wellness wishes to advise the public that following the passage of Tropical Storm Elsa, the following actions should be taken regarding food and water safety: controlling the spread of infections and mosquito and rodent control. In a statement, the ministry cautioned the citizens on water safety and food safety. They're also reminding the public to control the spread of the virus infection. This can be done by covering nose and mouth when sneezing and coughing to reduce the spread of droplets and therefore infection. Also, observe good hand washing practices. It is important that the hand sanitizer is not used to replace hand washing. Mosquito and rodent control is also crucial. Conditions immediately after a disaster are likely to cause a rapid increase in the population of insects and rodents. This is due to collections of large water bodies and debris in the environment. Some tips to minimize this are: all garbage should be properly bagged, tied and stored until collected. Punch holes in the bottom of tins to avoid water collection, and dispose of containers as soon as possible. The island was spared the worst from Sunday's passage of Tropical Storm Elsa. However, there was extensive flooding in some areas. Residents of Beach Road in 9 Miles Bull Bay area said they were negatively impacted by the rains.
Yesterday, the Bull Park River was running heavy, flowing over it full, come over, coming in my yard after block off some of the water from off the main road coming down. As you know, we from down by Beach Road, anytime it rain, we always get the bad part of it and get nothing out of it. Get flood out, we don't get nothing. Right now, we're looking some help.
Sections of the roadway in 7 Miles Bull Bay St. Andrew that's presently under construction, part of the South Coast Highway, were also affected by flood rains. The construction of the Bull Bay Bridge is part of the Southern Coastal Highway Improvement Project and is being built by the China Harbor Engineering Company. The site was also impacted by flooding. Residents of Bamboo River in St. Thomas were impacted by flooding on Sunday as Tropical Storm Elsa affected the island. However, citizens are pointing to blocked drains due to dumping as the main cause for the flooding.
Well, the problem we have is with the gully. Anytime the rain falls, we don't see no one come help with. Yeah? We are alone if we just do everything ourselves. And the diamond round, so when I see them drop helicopter around them, I don't see no one come back. So them only come look and promise and them go.
Yes, so you're alone if you do your thing yourself. Tell me what you do.
And we go feel the put net. 1, 2, 2 there. So in all that 4 hours we go down there go work net. I want the trouble, we take and dig it out. Yeah? That's what I can run out.
Where?
See the goes here? Right back down to that time and tree there.
So if you never did that, what would have happened?
We'll have more water. More water and after that the place more.
The Jamaica Public Service Company, JPS, says it's facing a major problem with customers offloading from the company's electrical grid. Chief Operations Officer Gary Barrow says this has far-reaching implications, including increased cost to JPS's operations. He shared the concern while addressing a recent Parliament Joint Select Committee reviewing the Electricity Act 2015.
Mr. Barrow says offloading takes 2 forms.
One is where the customers leave the grid entirely, so they are no longer grid tied. And the second is when they shift their load. That is, they partially leave the grid, and at times they will jump back on the grid through being grid tied.
He says large industrial and residential customers are the ones who tend to go off-grid, and they contribute to a large portion of JPS's revenue.
We have other areas that contribute to the distortion when speaking of grid defection. And the first is an inequity in the tax treatment across corporations that in one instance provide incentive for certain corporations to leave the grid and puts JPS at a disadvantage.
He says the second issue is a lack of a cost-based structure, noting that the tariff must be based on the cost to serve the customer.
And if we consider the cost to serve the customer, this means that when a large customer leaves the grid, the remaining customers then stand the cost, primarily the fixed cost of the grid, which in simple terms, it means that when customers leave the grid, the remaining customers, who are typically the ones less able to afford to leave the grid, then has to bear the burden of the cost of the grid. And so that is something I think is very important that we bear in mind. And typically what we have seen in other markets is that this leads to something typically referred to as the death spiral, where as more customers leave the grid, the cost of the remaining customers become more expensive, and then those customers are then further incentivized to leave the grid, and it continues through what we call a death spiral.
Mr. Barrow explains that this will affect the viability of the grid.
We highly recommend preserving the integrity of the current definition of self-generation, as we have seen some recommendations that would disrupt that and encourage further grid defection. And so, in summary, we strongly encourage the legislators to evaluate the proposed changes and determine whether the criteria that is being used is in the collective interest of all the customers served on the grid and ultimately in the best interest of Jamaica.
He says while the JPS respects the right of a customer to leave the grid, they are urging all stakeholders to consider the implications.
Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett said that he is expecting increased visitor arrivals for the summer.
I had predicted 150,000, and the numbers are showing that we'll be closer to 175,000 visitors in the month of June. And that is significant in terms of recovery.
The minister says he is confident that it's tied to the availability of COVID-19 vaccines, which is crucial to the recovery of the industry.
We're going to get the vaccine, and we're going to get it in good order and in good time, and we hope a little faster than is even predicted, because the world is changing and the availability has also changed, and the attitude of those who have towards those who have not is changing. Indeed, in some instances have changed, and it means that there is likely to be a greater flow to countries like ours. What we want to make sure is that we are all ready and not being hesitant, because to be hesitant is to delay the recovery, is to delay your own livelihood.
The minister was speaking at a recent dinner to host his Saudi counterpart minister, His Excellency Ahmed Al-Khatib. He was among the global tourism officials who visited Jamaica on June 24 to attend the blended staging of the UNWTO's 66th Regional Commission of the Americas. The Domestic Violence Act and the Sexual Harassment Bill were the focal points of Government Senator Dr. Sapphire Longmore's contribution to the State of the Nation debate in the Senate on Friday. She says the government is prioritizing the protection of women against abuse through the enhancement of legislation and other interventions.
Led by the Honorable Minister Pbcj, legislation that seeks to protect our most vulnerable and valuable were addressed. We have seen where there were amendments to the Domestic Violence Act, which include a new definition of domestic violence as not only being physical, but also psychological, emotional, and sexual. The effect of this, Mr. President, is that for the first time, men and women who control their partners through threats by restricting their personal or financial freedom could face sanctions the same way as they would if they were violent physically.
Dr. Longmore says the change to the legislation is crucial as it will complement initiatives created to liberate survivors of domestic violence.
Financial abuse is one of the most frequent forms of suffrage vulnerable women experience, Mr. President. And so this government seeks to enable as best we can financial independence of women. The Women's Entrepreneurship Support Pilot Project will provide 10 grants to vulnerable women to build businesses and achieve their independence. We thank UN Women for partnering in this very important initiative.
Dr. Longmore also notes the submission of the report of the Joint Select Committee of Parliament to establish the Sexual Harassment Bill.
And when that bill becomes law, it will deal a blow to sexual harassment by bringing relief to victims, punishment to perpetrators, and acting as deterrents to others.
The Sexual Harassment Bill outlines the types of conduct that constitute sexual harassment and prohibits certain related conduct. Meanwhile, Senator Longmore says the penalty for disobeying a protection order should be increased to greater safeguard those who need to keep abusers away. She is suggesting that in situations where, because the court was closed, the person could not get that order to get the abuser removed, an emergency service should be used. We now get the latest market updates in this business report with Gabriel Thompson.
In Monday's trading session, the JSE Combined Index advanced by 2,754 points to close at over 429,000 units. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 89 stocks, of which 42 advanced, 32 declined, and 15 traded firm. The Junior Market Index declined by 6 points to close at over 3,000 units. Stocks advanced for 1834 Investments Limited, Burrito Investments Limited, and Caribbean Assurance Brokers Limited. Stocks declined for Caribbean Cement Company Limited, Caribbean Flavors and Fragrances Limited, and Community and Workers of Jamaica CCU Deferred Share. Trading firm were Access Financial Services Limited, Blue Power Group Limited, and Everything Fresh Limited. Wigton Wind Farm Limited ordinary shares was the volume leader with over 2.7 million units, followed by Future Energy Source Company Limited ordinary shares with 1.9 million units, and the Sagicor Select Funds Limited Financial with 1.5 million units. In foreign exchange trading for Monday, July 6, the US dollar sold for an average $151.11. The Canadian dollar ended trading at $122.92. The pound sterling traded for $209.63, and the euro sold for an average $177.02. In market data for oil, prices soared to multi-year highs on Tuesday, including U.S. crude hitting its highest since 2014 after OPEC Plus producers fell out over plans to raise supply in the face of rising global demand. No date for resuming negotiations was agreed after the talks were carried over for a third day after disagreements last week. Brent crude futures climbed 62 cents to $77.78 a barrel. West Texas Intermediate crude traded up $1.75 to settle at $76.91 a barrel. And on that note, we close this edition of the Business Report Inside the News on PBCJ. I'm Gabrielle Thompson. Pleasant viewing.
In regional news, we begin with St. Lucia, where the National Emergency Management Organization is cautioning the general public in that country to remain alert following the ravages of Hurricane Elsa, which left properties damaged across the island. More from Solish Alfred of HTS News Force.
Assessment of the impact to roads, infrastructure, lives and livelihoods continue as we work on bringing the country back to normalcy.
Director of the National Emergency Management Organization, Nemo, Doreen Gustav, frames the response of the coordinating agency and other government departments in the wake of the passage of Hurricane Elsa.
Nemo received reports of partial and total damage to homes throughout the island. On Saturday, July 3rd, the Prime Minister, an official from Infrastructure, and myself did an aerial reconnaissance to have a view of the damage, and as was mentioned previously, the damage to the banana fields were quite visible. Indeed, the agriculture sector suffered extensive damages.
According to weather experts, the 2021 Atlantic hurricane season has gotten off to a faster start than the same time period in 2020. The Nemo director points to the existential threat of the climate emergency driven by human-induced greenhouse gas emissions for the increased intensity of severe weather systems like hurricanes, which feed off increasing warmer ocean waters.
We have about 15 more storms remaining, and it takes only one to cause catastrophic effect on any one country. With the rise in climate change, we have seen the rapid intensification of hurricanes. For example, Tropical Storm Elsa changing rapidly into a hurricane within a short space of time. This behavior could have only been made possible due to climate change and the effects of climate change on our small island development states, and this could only be mitigated through preparedness.
Gustav issues a gentle reminder to the public to remain in a state of preparedness for any eventuality.
Your preparedness plan should include, for example, a family plan, a business plan, assessment around your home and property to identify the hazards.
The real and present danger of Hurricane Elsa was felt in the Caribbean, with a death toll of 3 in the wake of the destructive passage of the fast-moving tropical cyclone. 1 death was registered in St. Lucia and 2 in the Dominican Republic. The hurricane, which made landfall in Cuba, is now making its way toward Florida. Soaj Alfred, HTS News Force.
St. Lucians will go to the polls on July 26. Prime Minister Alan Chastanet made the announcement Monday. He says nomination day will be July 16, and the 2 major political parties have agreed to adhere to the protocols and policies regarding the efforts to curb the spread of the coronavirus. Mr. Chastanet leads the Rural United Workers Party, and it would be his 2nd consecutive election after guiding the party to victory in the 2016 poll. The opposition SLP will be contesting the polls under the leadership of former Deputy Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre. The Eastern Caribbean Central Bank recorded a net profit of $25.2 million for the financial year ending March 31, 2021, a 60.1% decrease from profits reported 1 year prior. Andre Huey of SKN Newsline has the details.
The bank's annual report and statements of accounts for the financial year ended March 31, 2021, which was published on the 30th of June, indicates that the decrease in net profit was due principally to a significant reduction in interest income earned on the bank's foreign reserves portfolio. The governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Timothy Antoine, said the ECCB's response in the midst of the turmoil has been focused, determined, and comprehensive. The centerpiece of this response has been articulating a vision for the region in the 3-year program of action for recovery, resilience, and transformation of the ECCB economies. He said, though proven to be a challenging year, the 2020-2021 period still brought about some key achievements for the ECCB. The introduction of the new public engagement series, ECCB Dialogues, the launch of Dcash, the digital version of the EC dollar, the world's first retail central bank digital currency, and the launch of the ECCB blog, Insights Towards Recovery, Resilience, and Socioeconomic Transformation. Governor Antoine says the bank's plans for recovery, resilience, and transformation in the new financial year are not merely aspirations. They involve a full slate of activities, which include the launch of the new ECCB Strategic Plan 2021-2026, continued collaboration with partners on the development of a renewable energy infrastructure fund facility, rollout of Dcash in the remaining 4 ECCB member countries, Anguilla, the Commonwealth of Dominica, Montserrat, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, development of a payment system reform strategy, and the continuation of the greening of the campus initiative to reduce the bank's carbon footprint. The full 2020-2021 annual report can be found on the ECCB website, www.eccb-centralbank.org. I'm Andre Huey, reporting for SKN Newsline.
In Trinidad and Tobago, ensuring that all students have a device for learning is critical. This from Minister of Education Dr. Nyan Gatsby-Dolly, as over 4,000 laptops were distributed to primary and secondary schools across the country. The minister says this is just the first tranche of 20,000 laptops that have been ordered by the government. TTT's Mahalia Joseph Wharton has more.
Minister of Education Dr. Nyan Gatsby-Dolly said a poll conducted by the ministry indicated that 35,000 students did not have personal devices.
To give our children the chance to survive in this world, in this education world, they must have a device. So it's more than just a device. It is an ecosystem of digital transformation that our children are now being equipped to move into. They have to exist there. They have to thrive there. They have to survive.
Minister of Public Administration and Digital Transformation Alison West was also present for the handover and said her ministry has been working closely with the Ministry of Education to secure devices and to ensure the new platform of learning caters to the needs of students.
I would like to encourage the principals, the teachers, and the students to get creative. The laptop is not only a tool on which you either sit at home or in the classroom and learn in the standard way. It gives you the opportunity to broaden your horizons, to change how you learn and you teach.
Monday was the launch of the government-procured laptop distribution. Another tranche is expected to arrive this week or early next week. Mahalia Joseph Wharton, TTT News.
In sports, Robert Scott, Director of Water Sports in the Jamaica Olympic Association, or JOA, says the organization is working to develop minor or non-traditional sports on the island.
Very, very importantly for us, we have moved to what is called the minor sports. Now, internationally, there is really no such thing as a minor sport. But, of course, when we say that, we mean a sport that is perhaps not as well established in Jamaica. And we have seen the growth in sports such as judo, fencing, rowing, and several others. And how we have supported that is that we have provided funding for many of these sports. We have also provided support, helping them to improve their administration, helping them to get even their equipment into this country.
Mr. Scott, who is also head of the Business Development Commission, spoke of the Advanced Sports Management Program spearheaded by the JOA.
One of the things we're most proud of is having put in place the Advanced Sports Management Program, where administrators will now have the opportunity to be formally trained to understand the discipline of building a sporting organization. And therefore, what we have seen, looking at the leadership within the sports, looking at the athletes themselves, we have seen how they have grown as individuals, grown as professionals, and grown as ambassadors to this wonderful country known as Jamaica.
Speaking during a recent interview, he said the JOA is working closely with Sporting Ground that falls under the JOA's umbrella.
So the various groupings that we have in the Jamaica Olympic Association, which is the first time this has been done, so where you have the water sports group, you have the combat sports, you have the field sports, you have the court sports. So you tend to have a nucleus around which you can meet with your director, and then you can discuss the issues that we have. Certainly the issues facing sports is much more than financing. Part of the issues are, how do we get the talent that we need? How do we find the talent that exists in Jamaica and certainly outside of Kingston? How do we mobilize those persons and create an effective training program? So in those smaller groups, be it water sports, which has a particular challenge being typically in certain only areas, maybe around Kingston Harbour. How do we work together to expand that talent pool?
The Jamaica Olympic Association was founded in 1936 and recognized by the International Olympic Committee in the same year. In other sporting news, with the Olympics set to begin in another few weeks, the public is being urged not to line the route of the Olympic marathon over fears that crowds of fans could spread the novel coronavirus. This came from Tokyo 2020 organizers on Tuesday. Concern is growing over rebounding virus cases in Japan. The marathon was at the center of controversy in the original build-up to the 2020 Games, when it was moved to northern Sapporo from Tokyo to avoid the capital's punishing summer heat. The women's and men's marathon finals are among the last events at this summer's Games and will take place on August 7 and 8. At a marathon rehearsal event in Sapporo in May, security guards stood with signs around their necks asking people to, quote, "Please refrain from watching the race," end quote, to prevent infections. And that's all we have for you today. Join us tomorrow right here as we do it all over again. You have just watched the news on PBCJ, the People's Station.